Hi, everyone. My name is Chloé Messdaghi, and you're about to dive into a talk that's totally gamified and interactive. Now, there's a way that you can participate, which is you can either DM me answers throughout this whole thing. They have to be the correct answers, and I may select more than one winner to get a 1-month free subscription to Escalate, which is the gamified platform that Point3 provides. That many of you maybe have participated in CTFs. So let's get going on this, shall we? So if you don't know who I am, I'm the VP of Strategy over at Point3 Security. I'm also an ethical hacker advocate. For those that are like, what is that? That means I just kind of look around the field and I'm like, what can be changed? How can we make it better? And then I do whatever it takes to get there. When I'm not doing that, I'm also the president and co-founder of WoSEC, Women of Security. I believe you had two speakers on here at some point that are from WoSEC. So Tanya, shout out to her, and Alyssa Miller. I'm also the founder of WomenHackerz, which is a virtual platform where non-binary and women hackers at all levels come together around the world, and we do workshops, CTFs, and so on. But it's a good place for us to kind of connect with each other and have a safe space. I'm also the Hacker Book Club organizer. Basically, we meet every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And every month we read a new book, and it's usually written by a hacker in the community, and the hacker community reads the book together. And yes, the author does attend, and sometimes those that are mentioned in the book are also in attendance. I'm also a podcaster for ITSP Magazine's The Uncommon Journey with Phil Wiley and Alyssa Miller. And last but not least, that is my website below. And then my Twitter and Instagram is exactly the same. Feel free to follow. I'm always down for chatting with you guys. So what we're going to cover is a few things. We're going to go into the history of gamification, how our brains are stimulated by it, and why gamification helps security teams. And then we'll go how gamification has transformed lives. And then I'm going to do if you have some remaining questions for me, more than happy to answer them. So what is gamification? So gamification is basically, think of it as games that work on problem solving, processing speed, attention span, and memory. And now we're going to dive into the history. Now, this is the driest part of this entire presentation, and I'm giving you a heads up about it. But if you pay attention very closely, you may win something very special. So take a look at this wonderful chart. This is your chart of gamification. So in 425 BC, dice games were created to fight major famine. 3100 BC, the first board game was created in Egypt. And S&H green stamp was the first time ever marketers actually sold stamps to retailers to use to reward customers. And in 1958, the first video game was actually invented. And Charles Cardo found a consulting firm called Game of Work, and it brings feedback loops found in sports and into the workplace. And MUD1 is created by Roy Trebuchet at Essex University. It was the first multi-user virtual world game. Now, Thomas Malone publishes What Makes Things Fun to Learn, a study of intrinsically motivating computer games. And in 1981, the first ever 3D video games were released. American Airlines actually was the first airlines that introduced a first frequent flyer program called AAdvantage. Holiday Inn saw what American Airlines did. It was like, why don't we do that with our hotels? And they launched their first hotel loyalty program. National Car Rental was like, well, why aren't we doing that with cars? So then they launched their first car rental rewards program. Now, at this point, 30% of American households own an NES. A new generation of gamers is now officially born. And then Richard Bartle publishes Who Plays MUAs, which divides video game players into 4 unique types. And 2002 Serious Gaming Initiative forges the link between the gaming industry, training, health, education, public policy. And in 2003, Nick Pelling coins the term gamification. In 2007, Bunchball created Dunder Mifflin Infinity, a gamified website for the TV show The Office, and it receives over 8 million page views in 6 weeks. In 2009, Quest to Learn accepts a class of 6th graders into a game-based learning environment. In 2010, DevHub adds a point system to its website and it increases user engagement by 70%. And by 2010, Gamification Co. holds the first gamification summit. And you won't believe where it was. Actually, you probably do. It's SF. Let's be real. It's San Francisco. And then in 2012, 45,000 enrolled in a Professor Kevin Werbach's online gamification course through Coursera. Now, in 2012, Mozilla Opens Badges initiative was launched. And this was an open source badges that can be used to mark accomplishments online. In 2012, Gartner predicts 70% of the global 2,000 organizations will have at least one gamified application by 2014. And in 2014, MT Research predicts that gamification will be a $2.8 billion industry by 2016, which is true. But guess what? It went way beyond that. It's actually supposed to be about $11 billion industry by the end of this year. Now, I did tell you this was the most dry part, but this is the time when you get to participate. So on the platform that you are using to ask questions or not, feel free to give your answers on there. I will keep track of it. But also, if you don't, or if you're not on that right now, that's okay. You can also just DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open, and it's at Chloé Messdaghi. Now, you ready? So the first one to respond to these questions correctly, you will be submitted into getting a 1-month subscription. So let's do this. In what year did the first video game come out? I feel like I should have Jeopardy music in the background. I think next time I'm going to do that. In what year did the first video game come out? All right, next question. In what country invented the first board game? What country invented the first board game? Next question. And yeah, that was Egypt. What airline did the first frequent flyer program? So what airline was that, you guys, that did the first frequent flyer program that also made, you had a car rental that followed it, you had a hotel chain that followed it. Which airline was it? And then who coined the term gamification? Now, this, believe it or not, is always the hardest one for someone to find out what the answer is. All right. And what was the gamified website by Bunchball for the TV show The Office called? What was the gamified website by Bunchball for the TV show The Office called? And then I think this one is the last question. Gamification is expected to become a blank billion-dollar industry by the end of 2020. What is that wonderful, gigantic number? All right. All right, end of pop quiz. It could be a trick. It shall be a mystery, but let's dive back into the presentation now. And if you guys get what that clip is from, I feel you. We're Monty Python fans. All right. So fact is, overall, InfoSec has always been gamified. Think about it. We have CTFs, we have bug bounty, we have hackathons, and many of us became hackers because we wanted to beat games. We want to be better than our peers because they were better than us. Let's be real. They were better than us. So we found ways like cheat codes and other methods of doing so. But most importantly, when we hunt for vulnerabilities, it's a game of how far does the foxhole go? It's a constant, how can I outsmart this and that? And so yes, you get another wonderful chart. And this one's a lot shorter, as you can tell. But pay attention, I think you've learned now. So October 10th, 1995, Netscape launches the first ever cash reward for finding security bugs in the Netscape Navigator 2.0 beta. And then the first DEF CON CTF was in 1996. And then bug bounty programs were being created and managed by companies such as Google, Facebook, and Mozilla. And you're wondering like, wait, I'm a little confused on it. Let me explain. So companies didn't have HackerOne, Bugcrowd, or Synack. And because they didn't, they had to do it themselves. And this was cool for them, but they also learned a lot of lessons on the way. So then you have Point3, which started in 2007, and then you have the birth of the bug bounty platforms, which changed a lot for us. It actually got us more out there, like, for example, hack the Pentagon, hack the Army. It was because of these bug bounty platforms that people starting in major enterprises started trusting the hacker community to help them find their vulnerabilities. And it started to change slowly. Oh, what is a hacker? And that's the cool thing about it all. But most importantly, it also showcased that gamification works, and it's what drives humans. Rewards. Just like dogs, we like our treats. 2014 to today, gamified has been trending on the rise, and we see that everywhere. And it's back, another round of pop quiz time. Now remember, either DM or put in whatever area that you want to on the platform on your answer. The first bug bounty program was created in what year? When was the first CTF at DEF CON? And when was, the year. What year was the first CTF at DEF CON? All right, that's it for the pop quiz time. But now we get to dive into my favorite part. Before I got into InfoSec, I was obsessed with the brain in every single fair. So we're going to dive into how our brains are actually stimulated by it. So we're going to get to know your brain, but the area that I want you to focus on is that green section right there called the temporal lobe on the left side. Then we're going to dive into the other side of the brain. You see there, the amygdala and hippocampus, because those are the two main players when it comes to having gamified. Now, the thing you should note about is that all these questions that I covered, that pop quiz, giving you short response time from learning something very brand new, that was all to stimulate your temporal lobe. So all those pop quiz questions were instant, wanting to find out if you collected any information or data. And the temporal lobe does that. So what the temporal lobe does is that it actually takes the part of your brain where you actually you have your short-term memories, and it gets put into your brain, so then it becomes something long-term. So the thing is that the hippocampus is the part of the temporal lobe that plays a major role there. The other thing to note about it, it's also where you process sensory input into derived meanings for the appropriate retention of your visual memory, your language comprehension, and your emotion association. This is where gamification thrives, and it's where the amygdala and hippocampus are. So we're going to do another activity. I'm going to say some things out loud, and you're going to fill in the blank. No, these are not the ones that you tweet at me in DMs or put on there. This is for you to do at your own home, and you can wake up your neighbors or wake up your home. I don't know what time it is there, but I'm assuming it's either in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning. So let's scare our neighbors, shall we? So shout out the answers after I give a description. Here we go. What is a plant having permanently woody main stem that usually is growing to a high height and developing branches at the same distance from the ground? What is that? It's a tree. Another one, the nutritious orange to yellow root of a plant of the parsley family. What is it, you guys? Carrot. An article of furniture consisting of a flat top supported on one or more legs. A table. So you're kind of seeing here, I could keep going through, there's a few more here, but the thing to note about is that with the temporal lobe itself, I'm reading out a description of something, and it's connecting to an image in your brain. So that's what the temporal lobe does. It takes whatever you're hearing and makes it into a picture. So all the descriptions adds an image to your brain, you register the image, and then you are able to figure out what it is. Now let's dive into the next one. So overall, this entire slide, this is going to be the most important thing when it comes to gamification, your amygdala and hippocampus. The amygdala does control your emotional response and helps your brain store memories. This is why, for example, I don't know if you've ever heard this term about amygdala hijack. It happens when you're in a very high stress situation. So say, for example, you get in a car accident. Who's been in a car accident? Okay. So if you've been in a car accident, what happens is that everything can slow down, it seems like everything is going so slow, but at that moment it's actually going really, really fast. So what is happening in that moment is that you're not able to think about anything really, but what you're being able to notice is that in that moment, you feel like you don't, like your entire brain is focused on that one thing. So that's what can happen when you have something that's highly stimulating. This can happen. And the other issue to note about amygdala hijack is that your prefrontal cortex of your brain, the front part of your brain, is the CEO of your brain. It makes the decisions. The amygdala is completely subconscious. So the only time that it registers a fear or a flight mechanism is when you're actually like consciously aware and processing the information. So remember, amygdala is subconscious, doesn't know. The hippocampus is another situation like that. So the prefrontal cortex of your brain that you're actually fully aware of what's going on. All right, so let's go dive into the hippocampus, which works very close to your role in memory, navigation, and emotional response. So overall, the hippocampus, what it does, it takes short-term memories in the hippocampus and they're transferred to a long-term memories in the temporal lobe. Our conscious memories are formed by the hippocampus taking a snapshot of the short-term working memory and committing it to a long-term memory stored in the temporal lobes. So we're gonna do a quick activity. And if you hear my dogs in the background, I am sorry, they decided to wake up and play in the other room. So what I want you to do is look at this list, read it thoroughly twice to yourself, and keep an eye on the order as well. And I'll wait here for a little bit. Okay, I think you've read it through twice now at this point. So this is the next step. I want you to open an email or pull up notes or anything that you can write down, even if you're old school with a piece of paper and a pen, that works perfectly fine too. And by the way, if you're that type of person, I love you because that is how I do my things. It's the only way